Good evening, everyone. Welcome once again to Unabridged Bookstore's virtual event space and to our celebration of the Guncle. We are thrilled to be hosting author Stephen Rowley tonight. Stephen's previous books, The Editor and Lily and the Octopus, have been bestsellers here at Unabridged. We're very excited about this new one. Originally from Portland, Maine, Mr. Rowley is a graduate of Emerson College and now lives in Palm Springs, California. He's worked as a freelance writer, newspaper columnist, and screenwriter, and in the past has been a great friend to Unabridged, so we're very, very excited to have him join us virtually tonight to celebrate this book. Helping us host this conversation is another favorite here at Unabridged, Christopher Castellani. Christopher is the author of 5 books, most recently the novel Leading Men, for which he received fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation, the Massachusetts Cultural Council, and the MacDowell. Christopher is on the fiction faculty of the Warren Wilson MFA program and the Bread Loaf Writers Conference. He lives in Provincetown in Boston, where he is the artistic director of Grub Street, the country's largest leading independent center for creative writing. We're thrilled to have both of them here tonight, so thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Matt. Stephen.
Christopher. Hi.
Hello, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been a wild 2 weeks.
I can imagine, right? I mean, I just wanted to start out by just saying how thrilled I am for you to see the reception that this book has gotten. I've spent some wonderful time reading reviews, reader reviews and other reviews, and then following.
Oh, good, because I don't like to do that. So you tell me, has it been okay?
They're all good, all 5 stars across the board. Yeah, it's the first time it's ever happened in all of literary history.
Fantastic! All right, but we're done here. I guess this is a good place to leave it. And
exactly.
Success.
So, and it's just like and it's following you on social media, which is such a joy. And just seeing all the love that's poured out for you and for you as an author and as a person, for this book and for your fans of your other books who are now coming to this book. It's such a joy to see. And I think, and you don't have to read the reviews for me to tell you that. I can tell you a sort of general theme, which is that people are and all the 5 stars in all the 5-star reviews, the one of the themes is that people are just so happy to have a book like this to turn to at this time. It's the kind of book that is making people want to like re-embrace life again. It seems, I know you're probably like maybe a little not thrilled that the book has come out at a time when it's not like when the pandemic is in a distant memory. But I also think that the timing is actually perfect because it's the time when we're all coming out of this pandemic. Hopefully we're all kind of re-embracing life, and this book again is coming at that time that's giving us the perfect kind of jumping off point. Anyway.
Well, I planned that. I planned the entire thing, the pandemic, us being home at 15 months. I'm sorry to all you who were quarantining at home, but it was worth it to plan for the reception of this book. So no, it's just, there's no way to plan something like that. There's no way. In fact, I wrote the bulk of this before COVID was even a thing that I'd heard of. But you're right. It is about a character named Patrick O'Hara, who is a sort of former television star who is living in sort of a reclusive life in Palm Springs. He's sort of self-isolating after a loss in his own life, when he is tasked with taking in his niece and nephew for the summer after a fresh tragedy. And that sort of brings about a season of healing for all 3 of them. So it really is about someone who's been very isolated from the world, finding his way back into the light, as you say. And my God, I mean, if I wish I could have, orchestrate, that's one thing an author has absolutely no control over, is world events when his book comes out. And I wish, like everything's going to be downhill from here, because it doesn't, to the extent that people think this is a great read for the moment. And I think it has a lot of humor too, which helps. I'm just grateful for it, and I'm so touched by the early. All authors are lying if they say they don't have kind of one eye on it, or I'll let my agent tell me, or my editor, or my mother.
Mhm.
It's so incredible the sort of embrace that this book has had already from readers, particularly on Instagram, bookstagrammers who have been just so generous and so amazing, and they do this. They find something they're passionate about, and then they are so passionate, and it's
Absolutely.
just a delight as authors. I don't think they'll ever know how much it means to us.
I know. I mean, it is, and it has clearly touched a nerve in that way, in that good way, that has inspired people to do that. And so, I know authors who like do try to like game the system, like what's going to be the thing that's going to be the next thing. So I'm going to try to like write my book and try to make that happen. I know that you didn't do that, where did this, where did this idea come from, and how did the sort of seed of this book start, and how did it sort of change along the way?
Yeah, but yeah, before I say that, I'll say you're right. You can always tell there are people trying to reverse engineer what was
Yep.
successful in the past.
Yep.
And like we all know what those books are. I don't need to call them out by name. And that's successful sometimes. But what is truly exciting, I think, as a reader and as someone who involved in publishing, is at least once a year there's a book that bubbles. And I'm not saying mine is it, but there are better examples. But one that sort of bubbles up naturally because it connects with readers in a completely original way, and that's what's always so much more exciting to watch. And the origin of this book was it came from a very very natural place. It's called the Guncle, and for anyone who doesn't know, I think if you're shopping at Unabridged, you probably know that Guncle is slang for a gay uncle. It's become sort of quite popular term in the past 5-10 years. There's even a Guncle's Day now in
No way.
August. Yeah. Any excuse to sell greeting cards. So yeah, it's like Guncles are here to stay. And not only is it a gay uncle, but it usually has a connotation of a larger than life persona. So there is an anti-Mamish quality to it, and I've had a long fascination with Mame. First the Patrick Dennis novel, 1955 novel, and then the Rosalind Russell Broadway show and a Russell movie, and then a Broadway musical with Angela Lansbury, and a Lucille Ball version of the musical, which is a hot mess.
You're part of this tradition now, right? Like
yeah, well, yeah,
Yeah.
like if the Guncle has legs like that, then absolutely, I will ride it all the way. But and I'm a Guncle of 5, and the idea really started in 2018, I think it was, when my brother brought his 2 boys who were ages 3 and 5 at the time, and then he was called back to work on the East Coast. He's from Boston, and is a attorney there, and he was called into court to defend a client, and he left me with the boys who were 3 and 5, and suddenly I felt like the understudy who was like thrust into the leading role for the rest of that week. And there was a lot of tap dancing that had to go on to entertain these kids who were disappointed not to be spending the week with their dad as much as they were with their uncle. So literal tap dancing maybe, but metaphorical tap dancing, absolutely.
Is that when you thought, wait, okay, this is kind of crazy and whatever, but I can write about this, so I should pay attention? Or did it come later?
This is when my brilliant editor, Sally Kim at Putnam, she was following, she has young kids too. So she was watching me flail during that week on Instagram. And, at the end of that week, she called me and she said, I think there might be something there for you to explore. And gosh darn it, she was right. She was right.
Had you been working on something else at the time, and that you like abandoned?
Yeah, there are always some false starts, I think, anytime. Do you find that too? Or it's like something you struggle and you struggle and you struggle, and then the one comes and it kind of goes like lightning sometimes, and that's what this was. But I was really picturing it, a la Mame, as a light comedic novel. And then that summer, when I was not very far into it, I lost one of my best friends from college to breast cancer, and she left behind a 6-year-old son. So it got me thinking much more seriously about grief and kids and what a 6-year-old might remember of their mom. And you know, and then suddenly my light comedic novel was still very comedic, I hope, but it wasn't so light anymore. And it is an exploration of grief and isolation and what that feels like, even though I think the book is still very, very funny, hopefully.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what makes it work, right? I mean, you couldn't, I mean, it would have been a vastly different book if it was just about the funny
Just
uncle.
zingers, yeah, you know,
Right.
one-liners, and yeah.
Yeah, that's a skit. That's not a book, right? And
Right.
you know, and it may have started that way, but along the way, you were going to find some way to bring the kind of depth and the kind of emotional resonance that you know that characterized your other two novels, which also had lighter elements to them, but also had a core of and of grief and so in both cases,
Yeah.
but of other things as well, of other kind of deeper elements. So I mean, it kind of followed probably the same or a similar kind of natural evolution, and that way. But is I mean, or is that the case? Like, what was this? Was this book different from your other two in any significant ways in terms of the process of writing it,
Yeah, it
or,
was.
or about what you were trying to do with it? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, life intercedes and it evolves, and I think that's true with any book because it takes, it takes so long to write a novel. And this was definitely a different experience than my last novel, The Editor, which was about a young gay writer in early 1990s New York who develops this relationship with Jacqueline Onassis when she was working as a book editor. And for that book, like you had done with Leading Men, where you're working a real life historical figure into your book, there's so much research that goes into that. And you take that mantle of that charge like so seriously. And there's always work, and there's always work and research to refer back to if you're feeling stuck. But this one was just like, a world, I'm not going to give myself too much credit. I was going to say a world I'm creating out of whole cloth, but because book takes place in Palm Springs, I happen to live in Palm Springs. I happen to be an uncle, just as this character is an uncle. I happen to be a gay man of a certain age, like this character is. So like, all right, I shouldn't, let's not do too much of this, but it was inevitable. I think that life would inform this because there wasn't like the research to inform it in a way. And I think I wasn't sort of thinking along those lines as I set out, but it absolutely was a guide for me.
I have to have a true confession, which
you didn't do any research for Leading Men.
No, which is I've actually never seen any version of any MAME at all. Any of those, all of those versions that you've mentioned, I have not seen a single one. I'm like going to get my.
You're like Byron now. Oh, I make him, my husband, who I make him sit down, and and it's often like I laugh now because it's like my mother. I joke that she practically had to tie me to a chair as a 7 or 8 year old to watch The Sound of Music. Like, like you're gonna love this movie about singing nuns, and I'm absolutely not gonna love a movie about singing nuns.
Right.
And I just made Byron watch that, and certainly we'll make him watch different versions of MAME as well. But come on, well, you have some homework.
It made me wonder though, because I didn't know I knew that generally the story, right? I knew like generally the gist of who MAME was, but I wondered how much of this novel like was a retelling, or whether the main inspiration was the kind of transformational aunt, or in this case Guncle, who brings like a kind of new perspective or new rules, new sensibilities, to the kids. I wasn't sure how
Well,
you would otherwise.
if you are familiar, or if you get off this chat tonight and you go watch me, you said, Michael, you two have homework now. There are things that you will pick up that might be fun sort of Easter eggs. There are characters who are sort of mirror characters to MAME. And her sort of friend in the book, Vera Charles, is now a gay throuple who lives next door to Patrick. Or there's a character based on the Agnes Gooch character. So yes, if you know MAME, there are some fun things, but Mame sent her ward off to boarding school and sort of sidestepped the whole issue of grief, of the fact that he was an orphan. And these kids are the kids in this story are not orphan. They have lost their mother at the opening, at the outset of this book. But I didn't want to go that easy on either the project or myself, as a writer. And then two, the other thing that's really interesting that I was thinking about you a little bit as I was working this out in my head, because I was thinking of if I'm going to sort of reclaim this character as a gay man, Patrick Dennis was, bisexual at least, but he was married and he had kids and didn't come out until later in life and whatnot. And I sort of thinking, like perhaps was what are the for mid-century sort of closeted male writers like Tennessee Williams, not closeted necessarily, but like, do they write these sort of larger than life women as stand-ins sometimes for gay men, which they couldn't, they couldn't openly write about at that time. So if I'm in 2021, trying to like, oh, what am I saying? What is the joy of being able to write this as an openly gay character when that couldn't have been done in, say, 1955?
Yeah.
So that was a really interesting assignment kind of for myself also.
Definitely. Yeah, all of that is so interesting. And I want to say too, to go back to the beginning of what you said, that and to my question about or my statement about Mame, which is that you don't have to, for anyone out there, you don't have to know anything about like me, you don't have to know anything about Mame to enjoy this book and to be
not in the least
entertained and or to be moved by it. I just was curious because it's such a part of the sort of gay iconography, and yet I have not been, I wasn't familiar with it, so I was just curious if there were things.
But all these books, like, or all these, like Mary Poppins, I just had this long fascination with these, or Sound of Music, as I mentioned, like slightly heightened caregiver, flies in on the wind, and at a crucial time in the children's lives, and then maybe it goes out on the next, on the next gust of wind. But I didn't invent this genre, certainly, and I'm not trying to pretend that I had, but what was really interesting about this is, Mary Poppins had some literal magic, in that handbag of hers, but Patrick's, the character in this novel, his magic, as it were, is his lived experience as a gay man. So, his empathy, his pop cultural references, his humor, his politics, the way that he understands what it feels like to be an outsider, or these kids are feeling different and cast aside a little bit because their mother has been sick for so long and they don't feel like they belonged, or other children have shunned them for maybe being too sad. They sense something on these kids that makes them keep a different, like that's Patrick's superpower. So it was a real fun, it's not, we've all seen the movie where someone unprepared inherits kids and, they try to make pancakes and batter ends up on the ceiling and stuff like that. No, a gay man knows how to his way around the kitchen. It's this empathy and this, and the other sort of, qualities that he has that really interested me in writing about.
And that's another, and then again, that's another thing that brings a kind of depth to it, and brings another layer to to the story, that it isn't just about the hijinks, right? It is about what do these characters have to teach each other, that it goes deeper than musical theater or whatever it is, that and the idea of them as different kinds of, I mean, misfits is the wrong word, but different, but you said it.
Outsiders,
outsiders dealing with, like, anyone going through grief, or anyone who is gay or different, or has an element of difference to them, understands what it's like to move through the world in a way that is complete, that is like where they're experiencing the world completely differently from the person sitting next to them who's having the quote unquote normal experience, right? And so the fact that these characters are able to kind of like see each other across that, like recognize themselves in each other, I guess, or recognize that
Yeah.
each other is what gives it the kind of frisson, you know?
Yeah, I think, sometimes when you're grieving too, and, for these kids, I think there have been moments where they wanted to be invisible. You just don't want anyone to see you. And certainly, a closeted kid feels that same way too. Certainly I did. I didn't understand how straight boys my age could sense something on me that I wasn't even fully able to
Yeah,
vocalize or understand yet myself, but they could. So I just wanted to be invisible. And, there's real parallels there, I think.
absolutely. Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit. And I know that I think you did I think I saw on social media that you did a TV show today in Palm Springs. Is that right? Um,
Yeah, recorded, yeah.
okay, because I was also messaging earlier about how I was thrilled because I thought I was going to be the first one to get to ask you about.
Oh, it won't
No.
air till next week, so you can still be
Oh,
the.
perfect. Oh, good. So I get to break the, not break the news, but at least be the first person to talk officially with you about the film adaptation, which was just announced, I believe, last night or
Yeah,
yesterday.
yeah.
Um, and so here we're at our first event here on June 3rd, in which you've probably been like, I know how these things take forever. Those are all happening sort of behind the scenes, and then suddenly you can't talk about it and blah blah blah. But now you can like finally talk about it. So I would love. I
Now
know.
we can talk about. I remember I was just on an event earlier this week where I was being real coy. I don't know. Wouldn't
Exactly.
that be great if something happened? But
Exactly. So, and I know people are endlessly interested in. I mean, I always want to remind people, like, look, no matter how good this movie is going to be, the book is always better, right? So you should always remember to to get the book and to read the book. And then when the movie happens, the movie is going to be wonderful, but the book is always going to be better. But like, if you could talk a little bit about like what that process has been like, and I know I'm particularly interested in how, as far as you know at the moment, like what you think the differences might be between the the book and the film.
Oh goodness. Well, yeah, I come at it. Yeah, I've been very very lucky in that Hollywood has come calling for all three of my books now, and so I've been working in adaptations in different ways and in different roles. With Lily and the Octopus, my first novel, which was sort of it was rather autobiographical. Um, and so I have a sort of producerial role on that. I did not write the screenplay because I thought I'm not the best person. I really put my heart in that book, and I said, I always want to be able to point to the book, no matter what happens with the movie. I want to point to the book, and I said I had my say,
Right.
and that's the book. And with all of these movie things, it's interesting because you just hope like, oh, it's going to be a much bigger audience, and I hope they go back and discover the book. With The Editor, I did write the adaptation, and with the Guncle, I am writing the adaptation as well. Only I came to novel writing from screenwriting, so this is like a full circle moment for me. But with the Guncle particularly, I think there's so much rich dialogue, and it's so cinematic, and it has such a specific locale in
Right.
Palm Springs that isn't often represented on screen. That it was sort of catnip for me to want to do this. But it's always a challenge. My first two books were written in the first person, so that's hard. How do you take something that's so internal and make it external for the screen? It has to be dialogue or action. I think with the Guncle, what's so exciting, and I'm making it with Lionsgate, which is a major studio. They picture it. They do not have a streaming service, so this is going to be in theaters. Remember
Wow.
theaters? I'm so
I
ready
don't
to
know
go
what
back
that
in
means. I'm
theaters.
sorry. What?
Yeah, what's that?
What's a
And
theater?
which I love because at its heart it's still a comedy.
Right.
I maybe it's just me. Because Terms of Endearment is to me one of the funniest movies of all time, even though it's we remember it as this woman saying goodbye to her kids, but it's so funny. And the Guncle, I want to be the same way, and so to see it in theaters with an audience, I think is going to be very special. But it is going to be a big sort of gay family film, and we haven't really seen that. And the wonderful producer working on it named Kristen Burr, who comes from a career at Disney. She's one of the producers of Cruella this weekend. But the idea that someone who had built this career in the Disney model and is now working on a big family film fronted by an openly gay, character. That's really exciting to me. That certainly there are lots of movies about the queer experience, but a mainstream family comedy, as it were, is with heart. I haven't seen that yet, I don't think, and so it's exciting. It's exciting to be a part of.
That's so exciting. And yeah, I mean, I was thinking about that as I was, because I read the book, a year ago in galley form. Was lucky enough to have
Mhm.
it a while ago, and as I was going back through, I was reminded of the dialogue and how good you are. What a wonderful ear you have for dialogue and the humor, of course. And so it did occur to me now through the lens of film just how like you really did yourself a favor in terms of like writing so much dialogue in this book, because
Yeah,
not much dialogue, obviously. Script, screen, I've never written a screenplay, but the one thing I know about it is that it's all
there's
external,
lots of
right?
dialogue.
There's lots of dialogue. It's all external. There's, the stuff I write is like, I would never be able to write a screenplay because everything I write is just a character sitting in a chair thinking about something, which does not make for a good film.
Yeah,
But the fact that you were, you had, as you said, this very vibrant and very, thrilling locale, and with such a strong identity, along with all this dialogue, with the larger themes, and also the depth, and also the this sort of groundbreaking mode of big gay family film is really thrilling. But it did make me wonder, like, what you could do in the screenplay, or what you plan to do in the screenplay, as much as you can say that
yeah.
you put
So
into
when I sit down and start writing it,
yeah. Oh,
I'll let you know.
I thought
I'll
you
let
were.
you know.
I thought you were
You're right. It's like it was a similar challenge with the book in a way, in that how do you open it up a little bit? Patrick's the character who's grieving. The children are grieving the loss of their mother. Patrick was also very close to their mother. How much do you show of these characters? How much do you need to illustrate loss by showing what was lost?
Yeah.
And I think in film format that'll present its own challenge. And then they spend a lot of time in hunkered down inside, because Palm Springs was really interesting locale for me, because how do you write a book about grieving where it's just unrelenting, cheerful sunshine, like all the time? And I feel like in the book they're kind of hiding out from the sunshine a little bit, but in the movie you have to let some of that sun in. You have to open it up. It has to be sort of more visual a little bit. So that'll be the challenge, and just sort of opening the book up a little bit more.
Right. Well, it's so exciting. And I saw also that you read. No, was this that you read the audiobook?
Yeah, for the first time.
I was going to ask if it was the first time and what that was like, and if you. I was thinking about the dialogue there too, like how challenging that must have been, and I didn't know if you had an acting background.
Well, does the high school drama club count?
Sure.
But that's been it's been a long time since I've been on a stage. But it was such an interesting process. I ultimately enjoyed it. There were a couple times I was like, who wrote this crap, after reading a string of alliterative sentences that were just very difficult to read out loud. So the performer in me has sometimes had some notes for the writer, and I'm sure vice versa. But it is interesting, because we live with these stories in our head for so long, and they're so individually, privately ours, through the writing process. And then you put the book out in the world, and suddenly it belongs to everybody, and you have no control over how it's interpreted or delivered. I may have written the line, hearing an inflection going up, and someone may read it going down. But like I was saying with Lily and the Octopus, I can always point to the book and say that was my, if anyone is curious, and I really have no idea if it's any good, but you could try it. If you want to hear at least how I think it sounds in my head, you have this audiobook for the first time. And if anybody's not familiar listening in, we don't have to lean on the big corporation who we've relied on for this past 15 months for other things. There's Libro FM. If anyone's not familiar, it's a great service where you can get audiobooks and support independent bookstores like Unabridged. So Libro FM.
So yeah, highly recommend. I made that switch a while ago, and I'm never looked back.
Yeah, that's great.
So, that's awesome. So to go back to the book again, until we get to the audience questions, which I see we have a
Yeah,
couple
please, please ask questions. I'd rather talk about what you want to, what everybody wants to hear
but I'll just ask one of the questions I had for you was um, when I read it last year, I had used I like and I wrote a little blurb. I had said that it was like that the book was cleverly subversive, and I remember you being really happy about that. And you said something like, "I'm so glad that you said that." And so I was curious about what about this book is kind of like what like I know what I mean by it, right? What I meant when I thought that the way that you told the story and the themes that are coming through and the way that you did it was subversive. I was curious how you would, if you agree. Well, you said you agreed, and what you mean by it.
I always like I laugh because my agent told me once my brand was sort of high concept bait and switch. And
Love
I
that.
laughed
So
at
true.
that, Lily and the Octopus. It's a book about a dog and an octopus, but really, it's about being stuck in your life and how the obstacles that we perceive are sometimes, in our way, are sometimes greatly exaggerated, if not outright made up. It's a story. The editor. It's a friendship between a young writer and Jacqueline Onassis, but it's really a love story between a mother and a son. And here it's like, and it's always finding the balance because you don't want anyone to feel cheated. But here's, it looks so fun, and I think the book is so fun, and that's really the challenge always, is finding that balance. But it is a deep exploration of grief also, and so how do it's a little bit, not to steal from Mary Poppins, but it's it's a spoonful of sugar and the medicine a little bit.
Exactly. And I was thinking too, and I totally, as we've been saying, I totally agree that that's one of the, that's one of the things that makes this book so special. And also, I thought just about how it gives all these different kind of alternative, quote unquote, alternative families, right? And shows
Yeah.
different ways in which, adults and children, adults with adults, like all these different ways that people make a family, and what happens
Including
when
the polyamorous relationship next door, who, by
exactly.
the way, still pop over the fence every once in a while and have legitimately wise things to contribute. And you're right about that. I sort of love working in the space of what might seem like a traditional sort of family story structure, and then really layering in a queer sensibility to it. Particularly now, there's so many LGBTQ plus people raising kids and doing heroic, remarkable, beautiful, raising beautiful families and doing great things in parenting, and it's exciting to watch.
Currently, I mean, be having those rights potentially threatened, and I know there's a case in Philadelphia that is, I think, going to the Supreme Court, where and so I feel like in that way too, like that books like this can really, I always resist like books can teach people how to be better people. I mean, I think that totally happens, and I think that's
Yeah.
wonderful. But it sounds cheesy to put it that way, and I don't think books should be obligated to do that. But in this case, it seems like it does in that quietly subversive way. Like people fall in love with this family unit, and it starts to become quote unquote normalized to them, and then when things like that case happen, they say, wait, I know those people, like that's Patrick, that's whatever. Anyway,
Well, it's true. I mean, it's a long history of queer people telling their stories. And right now, this was a really interesting, even though I'm not a parent, this was we're at a point where this was interesting to talk about. Unabridged has been around for 40 plus years now. So, and been such a huge part of that, celebrating queer storytelling. But look how quickly, rights, and that we've gained, and it does all come from being out, to showing and telling who we are.
Right.
And there are certain story models, for me personally, like I don't need another white cisgendered male coming out story. I want to hand that off now to trans coming out stories, or other communities, a Muslim, coming out in a Muslim community, or an Orthodox community, or say just new versions of these stories. And so I like talking about certainly a lot of my friends have kids now, and stuff like that. That's just where I am in sort of middle age, and
Yeah.
it was
I
fun
feel
to do.
like the more the better, right? I mean, you just can't
Yeah.
have, it was like, what they asked Ruth Bader Ginsburg, like when, when will there be enough, when will there be enough women on the Supreme Court? And she
When
said,
there are 9, yeah.
right? Yeah. And so it's a similar thing. Like there is no point at which we have enough gay stories, and we need all the types of gay stories. I was even thinking about that during this Pride Month, when, when people are criticizing, I think rightly, that it's so corporate and all this sort of stuff. But I also think that, like, that too is powerful, right? That it means something if you're in wherever you are and you go to Target and there's this silly we can laugh at it and say, oh, stupid Target is trying to exploit by having this rainbow costume or whatever. But if I saw that when I was 10 or whatever, and I would have been like, I would have thought, well, there's a place for me, at least in Target, to buy.
No pun intended, but yeah, those probably aren't targeted at us directly, but
Exactly.
yeah, they are important for the kids who see them, and it's hard to remember how quickly things have changed. There's been a lot of talk about that, because they just had the Friends reunion, and so
Right.
there's been a lot of think pieces about queer issues on Friends, and
Mhm.
yeah, dated thing feels dated. Instead of getting mad at something that's 30 years old and doesn't talk about queer issues the way we wanted them addressed today,
Mhm.
celebrate how much work we've done in 30 years and how quickly things have changed for the better. So
All right, I have one more question before we get to the audience questions, I promise. But I was, and again, another thing purely curious, I'm curious about is like, is I recognize some of Patrick's sensibility in you in terms of his humor and all that, but I wondered whether, like, in the kids, in Grant and Maisie, if there are elements of your own nephews and nieces or your time with kids that you brought to those characters, and how you kind of formed them.
oh yeah, they're like little horcruxes
Yeah.
then, where I put a piece of my personality or soul in each one of those kids. Absolutely. From Grant's need to be sort of a bit of a little people pleaser and a jokester, to Maisie's sensibility and sort of figuring out who she is, and feels a step aside from perhaps her peers. Then yeah, absolutely.
I love it. And are they old? How old are they? Your what's the
My
age range?
actual nieces and nephews, I have
Yeah.
I have 5, the oldest of whom is 12. So, they run the
Yeah,
gamut
wow.
from that age group, but yeah, they're right in there.
I was just
Yeah,
thinking.
and forget
Yeah.
I feel so sorry. I'm sorry for any of you who are related to writers. To the extent that I stole anything from them, or observed, or borrowed, or what have you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. The book is dedicated to them. I
Right.
hope they will forgive me.
Exactly. I'm sure they will. It's such a loving portrayal. So, okay. So we have a couple questions so far. The first one was about, you had touched on this a little bit, but did you have a say in who wrote the adaptation of Lily?
That is with the studio's been very, very kind to me, more so than probably they are with a lot of writers. I think in part because it is a deeply personal story. I assume it's in their best interest to keep me happy, but they've been wonderful collaborators, wonderful to work with, and they hired a fantastic writer who is not only a great screenwriter but a great playwright as well, and that is I'm thrilled to have him on board. So.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I don't know that I would have had veto power if I didn't like him, but I do like him, and they have allowed me to give notes every step of the way.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, I mean, because you had mentioned how the story is obviously so close that that it might have been difficult. So, but it's great
Yeah.
that's going well. Um, and then our friend Margot I can always get this name wrong. Mugsnug out in Indianapolis. Hello, Margot. Um,
Hi, Margo.
she's asking about whether the latest, whether The Guncle is the only one of the films on the big screen, and what about are the other two streaming? Are they series?
Well, we shall see. But yeah, the other two have streaming components, and then whether or not there's a theatrical release, I think the answer to that is yes, but it might be. I don't know if it'll be limited to big cities or it'll be a shorter run, because they are both with companies that have streaming services. So we shall see.
Okay, excellent. And this happened to be one of my questions too, but someone else asks, what about the well, I'm going to ask in a different way. Sorry.
Okay.
I had mentioned that that I thought that I saw some of you and Patrick and you, etc. But were there other inspirations other than yourself for Patrick, or for or Auntie Mame, I guess? And then as a corollary, who do you think, who do you see in the adaptation playing Patrick?
Yeah, well, you never want to. It's a bad business model. It's a bad way to get your movie made if you write to one person and then you're sort of dependent on one person saying yes. I will start by saying, well, yeah, I think there's me. Patrick's sadder than me throughout, sadder than I am throughout much of the book, but the humor and much of him is similar. He's a little rougher around the edges than I am, and because he's an actor, I think perhaps a little more self-involved at the beginning than I like to think of myself as a writer who's more of an observer. But I think I get asked a lot about queer actors playing queer characters, and yes, in a perfect world, I believe in that. I don't know if I'm hard and fast at every single time it has to be this, but for this role, for Patrick, where, as I said, like his superpower really does stem from his queerness, then I do think it's essential that an openly gay actor play this character. So as I said, that, like, not to write to one person, but like Dan Levy is an obvious
Perfect.
choice right now.
Oh my God, I didn't even think of that. That's perfect.
And so yeah, like, great. If I were in charge of Hollywood, but now Dan Levy's probably getting offered every project. He probably has his pick right now. But Billy Eichner. I did an event the other night with Michael Urie, who's fantastic. Anybody who has a little bit of like who can play these roles with like as a brusque exterior, prickly on the outside, and a gooey center, not so deep underneath the surface.
Right. Gosh, Dan Levy would be perfect. I mean, Billy Eichner would be great too. But now that you've said that, now I can see it.
You can unsee it, yeah.
So I'm sure he's watching now. So Dan, call. What do you put your agent's number on the top there? You can call.
Yeah.
Another question from the audience: what are the Guncle rules? Were there were there real world? This is one of the other ones going to ask too. Were there real world hijinks that inspired any of those?
Real world hijinks. Well, the only one that I can imagine that there were real world hijinks inspiring that. So like anybody who fashions themselves after a sort of a mamish character, Patrick has these sort of witty bon mots that he fashions as Guncle rules. And I think one of them is an Oscar Wilde quote. So some are not his originally. One, though, it says is that the bottomless mimosas are not the same thing as pantless mimosas. And, those are two different things. So with the question about hijinks made me think about that, and that
doesn't come from real life at all, I'm sure.
That would never come from real life. No.
That's great. Yeah, the Guncle rules themselves are so you should like make a separate thing where I could see them like in a, I don't know, put up in a
framed in a bathroom.
Yes, exactly. Right. I'm like, how do I say this without making it sound really cheap and like not,
Yes, but in the Guncle, that bathroom would have a $20,000 Japanese toilet, or washlet, as it is,
exactly.
as Patrick has in the house.
And we have another question from Bill Chamberlain, who asks, good question about the secondary characters. How do you write? How like where do those? How did those emerge? Emery, Clara, Greg, and Neil. And then he says, unrelated. I think a less snarky Jim Parsons would be good.
Oh yeah.
And Madeline Kahn would have been stellar as Clara. Oh well.
Oh God.
I know, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I did, I don't know why, but I did a lot of sort of thinking about threes in this book. So it's Patrick and the two kids, they're a tight threesome for most of the book. Patrick has two siblings. So it's his brother, who's the children's father, and his sister Clara, who inserts herself in situations. They grew up as a sort of threesome. The throuple next door. I'm always sort of interested in three because it's two against one, and it's not always the same two against. It's constantly sort of changing. The angles in these triangles, and so that was always interesting to me. So informing some of those characters, they sort of came from there. Sometimes there's real life inspiration. I did have neighbors that were in a polyamorous relationship, although these characters are not them, and I was just always really delighted by that. I thought, and in setting a story in Palm Springs, like it's a place where no offense to Christopher, because I know he likes Palm Springs too. We've spent some time together in Palm Springs, but it's a place that people more associate with retirement than with raising kids. So if there's an element of this that's a fish out of water story too. So then it was fun to think like, all right, well, if we are going to put these kids here, like what are some things that you wouldn't traditionally think of kids having exposure to that would be fun to write about.
Yeah, I do think the setting works so well as another character, and there's
Yeah.
something to kind of, and it will be, as you said, in the, in the film as well, like playing with that as a contrast or as a, as a just another force, in the narrative is going to be, very cool.
Yeah.
The sort of required question we have to ask you is, which always bothers me, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
What am I writing now?
Exactly. Yes, you know exactly what it was. It's like we're supposed to talk about this book. Leave me alone. But
like I always, and I love everyone who devoured this book. It's fantastic. But some people say, "Oh my God, I read your book in one sitting.
Right.
When is the next one?" And
Yeah.
I'm like, it took me 2 years to write this, and you read it in 4 hours, and you want to know when the next one is.
It's a compliment, and yet it sometimes doesn't feel that way.
Yeah, no, it's a great compliment, and it gives me agita also. But I don't know if you feel this way. It's this past year it's been tough, and yeah, I've been writing, and we'll see if it's any good. I've got to go back and revisit it.
Mm-hmm.
But writing, it's like when you talk about the dialogue and having an ear for dialogue. Like for me, that's all. The writing is always an input output thing, and we haven't had a lot of input in the past 15 months. I haven't been out in the world. I haven't been observing people in the same way. And when I do, they have masks and maybe sunglasses here in Palm Springs on, and I can't, I'm not seeing in the same way. And so I think we all have to take a little time. And I was writing, as much as I could, because I knew once vaccines came and we could be re-engaged with the world, that I would not want to be stuck to my desk. And so, but I don't know. I feel like I'm gonna go do a little living this summer, and we'll see.
So you're not writing a COVID novel, like a novel?
I think this was my COVID novel. I think like strangely, like I feel this weight off my shoulders because
I mean, like a novel with COVID in the novel.
No. Right. Yeah, mine's the metaphorical COVID novel.
Yes,
but
exactly.
Yeah, I'm done with COVID.
I totally agree. I get anxious when I hear that there are books coming out that are going to be set during COVID. I'm like, why in the world would I want to read that? But I'm sure, there are going to be many good ones.
There's a way to do anything. There's a way to do anything brilliantly. But
right, exactly.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I totally agree with that too. That I mean, that's so smart what you said about the fact that we haven't had the same kind of interaction, the same kinds of opportunities for drama, like different stories among our friends and family that we can kind of extrapolate and turn into other things. And I think that is, it's funny because like a lot of the writer friends that I have are like the ideas that they're working on now are very internal. There are very like moody and internal, and it's whether or not it's a COVID novel set in COVID, it's a reflection of their fact that they've just been looking inward, and I'm part of that group, and looking inward, for this whole time. Anyway, um, and then I think the last question we have is about since it's Pride Month, another perfect timing for this book. I'm sure that was not by accident from your publisher, but other than your book, what any other Pride reading recommendations? That was not planned.
Well, this is a fantastic novel, and this was so. Like I came to your novel after writing The Editor, because what I like to do after I write is pick up books where writers have sort of taken on a similar challenge, just to see how they. I don't like to do it before because I don't want it to influence my writing. But I came to Leading Men after I'd written The Editor, and they were published around the same time.
Yeah.
And so that was hugely, that I was reading a lot of books. Last time we did an event together, I was reading a lot of books that had real life historical figures as characters in novels. This time I'm reading a lot of comedic novels, and I'm doing that one, as I said, to see how other writers handle that kind of genre and challenge. And then, but secondly, like, oh my God, like I'm just so thrilled and happy to laugh right now. So, there's some obvious, I reread Less, Andrew Sean Greer, which he just tweeted today that he bought a caftan, and listen, I have a caftan right here. I'm going to say that was because of me, maybe. He also gave a generous quote for the back of the book. But Les does these brilliant things with just wordplay that I think is so funny. I happen to be married to a writer who has written a very funny book called A Star Is Bored. And for anybody who happened to read that, I have that here too. For anyone who happened to read this, at the very end of the book, he proposed in the acknowledgments. And so anyone who read Byron's book and was wondering what happened, the answer to his proposal is in the acknowledgments of.
No spoiler.
I'm running out of books here.
You have to get the Guncle to find out what happened.
To find out what happened. Spoiler alert. It all worked out. And that's an incredibly funny book. I always like to highlight a debut author, and there is a novel coming by Emily Austin coming in July called Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead. And it is hilariously funny and a queer novel. And I got to read it early, and I love it so.
That's so great. Awesome. That's great. Well, I think we're at the hour. So
Matt, are you listening in? How did we do?
Both fabulous. Yes, you both were fabulous. Before we wrap up, I just want to say another word of thanks to both of you. You both have been such generous friends to Unabridged. We're so excited to have both of your books available and to share these with our community, with our readers here. So thank you for
Unabridged is a wonderful friend to us too. Ed was one of the first people who embraced Lily and the Octopus long before it was published. Patrick, hi Patrick, happy birthday Patrick. There's a Patrick, the Guncle is named Patrick. I don't know if that's a coincidence or not, but to the extent that you have been so generously supporting this novel, I may just have to name all of my characters after booksellers in the future. So there's a Matt in a future novel.
You should. Both of your books are still on our, bestsellers here in the shop and on our displays. We love Leading Men, we love Lily and the Octopus, and now we love the Guncle. So thank you both for joining us tonight. Thank you everybody for listening in. If you haven't had
thank you for supporting independent bookstores.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such an honor, Stephen, and a pleasure. And congratulations again. And Matt, I can't wait to get back to Chicago. I had such a wonderful time when I was there for Leading Men. You all were so incredibly generous. So I can't wait to get back there and see you.
I'm coming to P-Town. You're going to hear me knocking on your door.
Come.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for being here. Thank you everybody for listening in. Read the Guncle. Everybody have a good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
All right. Take care.
Bye.